certainly if you look at the investment opportunities in Africa, I do believe they are compelling. It is the second fastest growing continent in the world at the moment, and in an environment where investors are looking for growth, certainly I do believe Africa does provide excellent investment opportunity.
Obviously, with the rise in the African middle class, there's over 160 million people. There is a need for financial services, be it at the retail space, wholesale banking, as we're promoting Pan-African investments. How do you see the banking opportunities on the rest of the continent?
Yeah, we certainly think that the banking opportunities are large. We believe that a big piece of those banking opportunities in the form of economic profit pools in financial services live in South Africa or accessible through South Africa. But increasingly the pools outside South Africa, a bit like the GDP growth rates, are likely to grow at faster rates than those pools inside South Africa, although clearly at this stage the dominant pool does reside in South Africa.
Obviously, there's been a lot of focus on the banks recently, Basel III, regulating the banks. Africa largely immunized because we weren't exposed to international capital markets on that level. But as Africa opens up, they're entering an era of best practice. Is that going to be a limitation for growth, or is that going to be an opportunity?
Yeah, certainly I would think that many of the larger banks in the African continent are already at best practice, and that is in fact one of the reasons why we did escape some of the bigger challenges in the global financial crisis. If you look at Basel III, particularly on the capital front, all of the large domestic banks in South Africa are exceptionally well placed with current core tier 1, in other words the real proper stuff, well ahead of where Basel III is currently talking. I do think, and it has been well publicized though, that the proposed liquidity environment in Basel III will be a challenge, not just for South African banks, but I think what regulators will see is that it will be a real challenge to any emerging market with a developed mortgage infrastructure. Emerging markets generally having shorter dated liabilities, and a developed mortgage infrastructure giving you longer dated assets.
Talking about that kind of environment, many people are questioning the extent to which African banks are ripe for funding core African developmental projects, infrastructure, for instance. Are we going to see structured finance happening with partnerships with international banks, or are African banks going to play a leading role in this space?
I absolutely believe they will, and currently do that. For example, we've just financed the Seacom cable up the east coast of Africa, which we certainly believe will provide a significant boost to GDP growth right across the continent, knowing that there is a clear linkage between access to internet and telecoms, etc., and GDP growth. So certainly I do think that in the form of public-private partnerships, the domestic banks on the African continent will play a leading role.
And finally, just your views on growth. I mean, South Africa is growing at about 3%, but the rest of Africa is powering ahead. I mean, we've seen countries like Eritrea pushing the 10% mark, and some would argue they're starting from a low base. But there is a sense that some leading African economies are just not operating at optimal level.
Yeah, so I think it is true that some of the economies that are growing at much higher growth rates are starting at a lower base. But certainly if you look at the domestic economy in South Africa, I think our infrastructure challenges are well known, particularly those around power, and that clearly does have a limiting effect on our ability to grow the economy. And the other area, which is also receiving significant focus, will be on developing skills and education in the market to enable us to provide the brain power behind higher growth rates going into the future.
You're bullish about Africa?
Yeah, I'm bullish about Africa. It's a good place to live and a good place to invest.